This is CBC Here and Now.
A roof ripped off, roads closed, another messy day on the island.
You have to save your money and just don't blow it all away.
There's a void in children knowing about financial literacy.
Get them while they're young. Why this school is teaching students how to manage their money. Well, the biggest story of the month, maybe of 2020 so far, is Premier Dwight Ball's sudden decision to leave provincial politics. Now, during his pre-recorded resignation, the Premier said it was a personal decision.
The time has come to challenge individuals of conviction and commitment to step forward. It's time for me to spend more time with my family and friends in Deer Lake and to live a more private life. After 3 successful election campaigns that captured both a majority and minority government, I cannot ask my friends and family to follow me into another campaign.
Well, CBC News has learned the Premier's decision came after a group of his cabinet ministers requested meetings with him to discuss sensitive matters, including his continued leadership of the party. CBC News has learned that 7 of Dwight Ball's cabinet ministers wanted to talk with him in St. John's last week. They agreed among themselves that it was time to confront the Premier about mishandling controversial job hirings and to tell him it was time for him to step down. The cabinet ministers had 2 specific items on the agenda. Number 1 was Ball's announcement that he was moving Carla Foote from the Rooms back into government as an assistant deputy minister. This after a year of defending Foote, the daughter of the lieutenant governor, getting a $132,000 job without any competition. The about-face took the cabinet by surprise. There was no warning of the decision, and many found out the news on Twitter. Number 2 was the story of Gord McIntosh's housing allowance just 2 days earlier. Revelations the Premier's Chief of Staff, Greg Mercer, was involved in landing McIntosh a $336,000 sole source consulting contract raised eyebrows. But it was the $36,000 St. John's housing allowance for a man who lives in Scotland that angered the cabinet ministers. The combined embarrassment of the Foote and McIntosh stories is what prompted them to seek out the Premier to tell him it was time for him to go.
My decision today was a personal one for me, not to seek re-election. That's the reason why I made this decision, recognizing that we're in a minority situation. It is time for renewal, so it was an opportunity. We'll go through this process. A new leader will be in place, and I will be there to support that new leader and the Liberal Party into the future, and I'm not going anywhere.
Now, when the Premier says he was not forced to quit, it's technically true, but that's because he refused to meet with influential cabinet ministers who had the numbers to take him down. CBC News has also learned that on Monday night, there was supposed to be some kind of talk with those ministers at around 8 p.m. Dwight Ball's resignation at 6 preempted that. Mission accomplished. One final and telling point, possibly because there have been so many leaks, the Premier informed the media before letting his own MHAs know that he would be stepping down. Well, take a look at that. A roof in Corner Brook, ripped off, collapsed. That was the scene when crews arrived at Steers Distribution around noon. It's located on Brook Street in Corner Brook's downtown. The fire department blocked street traffic and crews had to cut power to the area. Cold day to be up there. No one was in the building at the time of the collapse. No injuries reported from the falling debris. Steers is a wholesaler with roots in Corner Brook that date back to 1870. Poor weather shut down the TCH between the Foxtrap Access and Holyrood Access roads today. Westbound traffic was rerouted as several vehicles got stuck. Multiple accidents were reported between Butterpot Park and Salmoneer Line, and there were whiteout conditions along that stretch and at times zero visibility. A whiteout also shut down a section of the Southern Shore Highway this afternoon. So let's bring in Ashley now. This is kind of in her world. Ashley.
Yes, Anthony, we talked about those snow squalls developing last night, and they certainly did today. We've got strong winds along the west coast, anywhere from 50 to 70 kilometers per hour. That's even stronger. These were in the morning for the eastern portion, 95 kilometers per hour in Bonavista, 87 kilometers per hour in St. John. So what we have right now is, if we take a look at the satellite and radar, you can see these snow squalls, and that's because of a cold air mass that's sitting over us. If you were outside at all today, you've certainly noticed notice those cool temperatures. And they're going to stick with us as we head through at least the next couple of days. Still looking at that potential for some snow squalls as we head through the day tomorrow. And then looking into the weekend, it actually looks quiet. I'll have all those details coming up.
Thank you, Ashley. Philip Butler's future is now in the hands of a jury. Deliberations have begun in the CBS man's second-degree murder trial. And as Ryan Cook reports, they'll have to decide if he killed his brother in self-defense or if his testimony was simply too good to be true.
Accepted now that Philip Butler wrapped his arm around George Butler's neck and they ended up on the floor. But what happened before and after that point is still very much up for debate. Defense lawyer Karen Rayner told the jury this morning that her client was just trying to get away from his brother. He loved him, but was scared of him, and he felt he was under attack that morning. She asked the jury not to consider if Philip Butler's actions were perfect, but if they were reasonable. Prosecutor Scott Hurley, meanwhile, didn't believe a lot of what he heard from Philip Butler during this trial. He poked holes in his testimony, in particular Butler's assertion that both he and George passed out a few seconds after he put George in a chokehold. Hurley asked the jury if they believed those few seconds were enough to kill a man, or if it's possible that Butler could have strangled him in his sleep. He said it wasn't reasonable. Butler testified that George stabbed him with a needle before he choked him. But Hurley theorized today that George stabbed his forearm during the strangling in an effort to break free.
There's three possibilities for the jury. They could find Philip Butler guilty of second-degree murder, manslaughter, or they could acquit him. The jury spent most of today listening to instructions from Justice Valerie Marshall. They've been sequestered for tonight, but Marshall has a few additional instructions for them tomorrow morning. After that, deliberations will begin. Ryan Cook, CBC News, St. John's.
Well, Corner Brook Minor Hockey is making a comeback after a major financial blow last year. The association updated its membership at a public meeting last night, and Here and Now's Troy Turner was there.
The Hockey Association has a lot of catching up to do. $90,000 worth of catching up. The group is rebounding, however, and things are looking up.
We got support out there. Support is there. And as long as we got support, we will do all right.
1 year ago, the association found financial irregularities, including unpaid bills for ice times. The missing money was reported to the RNC, which opened an investigation. The city stepped in with an interest-free loan this fall. Shortly after, the association's former treasurer was charged with 6 offenses, including fraud and theft.
The beginning was difficult, like I said, but through the growing pains, we're getting through it, and we've made mistakes, but we've learned well, and we will eventually, at the end of the day, we'll make sure everything is good.
Things are looking up. The association has cut expenses by nearly $25,000. Other changes have resulted in more revenue, and registration is up.
We're landing on our feet now, and at the end of the day, we're going to rise, and we're going to do good. We got a good bunch of parents, we got a good executive, and we got excellent players. Kids are the main goal. As long as they keep playing hockey, we're going to do great.
As the association weathers this financial storm, there are more plans to find solid footing, including more fundraisers in the off-season and further scrutiny of all expenses. Troy Turner, CBC News, Corner Brook.
Well, as we reported last night, Newfoundland and Labrador once had the lowest food insecurity rate out of any province in the country, but that, unfortunately, is no longer the case. We're now amongst the very worst. And that means more people are struggling to afford food here. So what exactly has changed in just a few years? Well, reporter Adam Walsh searched for that answer.
Buying food during the days of the oil boom was a little easier. Money flowed, and this province had a poverty reduction strategy under the government of Danny Williams. Back then, we had really low rates of food insecurity, rates that were actually the envy of the country, according to researchers.
It's something that Newfoundlanders should be very, very proud of, because that poverty reduction strategy was unlike anything we've seen anywhere in this country. It provided benefits to people who were poor to make their lives better.
The focus of government shifted, and during a 4-year period, it stopped tracking food insecurity rates for the province, effectively switched the lights off. When the lights came back on 4 years later, we had the highest rates of food insecurity out of any province in the country. Now, why did this happen? Well, we asked an expert, and the expert told us that part of it is because social assistance used to be tied to inflation. Also, there's no longer a poverty reduction strategy.
It sounds like pie in the sky, right? Oh, we're just going to give people money and then, they're going to spend it on food. But in fact, that's what happens. That's why the poverty reduction strategy was so effective through those earlier years.
For its part, the Liberal government says it inherited a bad economy and it has Muskrat Falls hanging around its neck.
You have this monster in the room, this elephant that is eating up all the money, but you still have a responsibility to provide government programs and services to the people that elected you and put you to work for them.
Dempster also pushed back on the numbers from the researchers, saying things may not be as bad as they seem, and points out it's still spending a lot of money on poverty reduction.
Overall, right now, there's $286 million that we invest in more than 100 poverty reduction initiatives, and that number have been growing steadily since we formed government in 2015.
Another problem, silos. Frontline workers are telling us that there are more of them now than under the poverty reduction strategy. That means it takes more effort and more people to get answers. Well, Lisa Dempster says her door is open.
I'm not offside when people say that. When people say, I'm concerned because your government is doing things in silos, I'm saying, well, let me help you get everyone at the table. We don't have all the answers. We are more likely to get where we need to be by working together.
When asked if the provincial government will bring back its poverty reduction strategy, Dempster said a final decision has not yet been made. Adam Walsh, CBC News, St. John's.
Well, as Adam showed, as people struggle to afford food, another problem the city of St. John's has found there's something that's not quite right with its affordable housing. It has too much of it sitting empty. 1 in 5 units is currently vacant. City Councillor Sheila O'Leary gave Here and Now a tour of one of the empty units.
Yes, so this particular space right here, this is a 3-bedroom housing unit, and most of the ones that we actually have available right now are 3- and 4-bedroom units like this one. The demographic is shifting all the time, so it's interesting that this is where the real availability is right now in terms of our vacancies. At present, we actually have a 19% vacancy rate of some of our nonprofit units. So we're very interested in making sure to do a public campaign to let people know that we do have these units available, because they really are an asset for people who are struggling with affordability and are maybe in between things. Okay, yeah, and so the base rental is actually $780 or 25% of your income above and beyond that. And so that basically enables people to have it as a portion of their income, a reasonable portion of their income.
This might be an opportunity here where we can help those who are calling in. Considering that some of the places I've visited personally, these houses are very clean, very well kept, in a beautiful neighborhood. I think for a family, something I think would instill a sense of pride.
It's bright, it's clean, it's affordable. It's to me, it's a great opportunity for somebody who's interested.
A junior high school in St. John's took a unique approach today to teaching students about how to handle their money. This, as we're getting new figures on bankruptcies in this province and how they've hit a record high. The number of bankruptcies last year is up 15% over 2018, and they're up by 107% if we look back to 2014. Now, as Here and Now's Terry Roberts shows us, one school is trying to prepare students at a young age.
I'm here at Brother Rice Junior High today, where this is all the talk, cold, hard cash, and teaching the next generation, students like these, some smart financial habits. From a distance, it looks like a traditional science or heritage fair, but instead of experiments or family trees, these display boards spotlight topics like taxes, retirement planning, credit cards. It's the first Brother Rice Money Fair, and the grade 9s are eager to talk about what they learned.
I learned a lot. I learned that you have to save your money and just don't blow it all away for gambling, and you often put in more money than you'll get back when you're gambling.
It was just really eye-opening, just realizing all these things that a lot of youth are missing out and not knowing.
It's good because I'm at the age right now I can start getting jobs, and it's going to help me in the future.
This is all very timely. Just this week, some very sobering numbers. Nearly 3,300 bankruptcies and consumer proposals in this province last year. You have to wonder, could some of that have been prevented if there were more of this in our schools? There is some financial literacy training in the curriculum, but this home economics teacher took things a little further.
There's a void in children knowing about financial literacy, as there is actually with adults. Many adults aren't comfortable with financial literacy, so we're trying to implement good habits into kids now so they're not so difficult to break as they get older.
When Ms. Daw approached me about the finance fair, I thought, what a fantastic idea to have students learn about something that's going to really impact them in the future.
This money fair judge was impressed.
I think this is something that should be happening in the schools right from grade 4 on up.
And so was this parent.
Oh, I think it's a great opportunity for kids to do research and learn about the financial impact of, everything on society.
This is the first money fair at Brother Rice, but Angela Daw says it won't be the last. And there's a good bet that events like this just might help some of these students from running into financial trouble in the years ahead. Terry Roberts, CBC News, St. John's.
Honestly, I'm a fan. I'd like to go back to 80s fashion. My mom actually was a teenager in the 80s. Sorry, Mom.
Sorry, not sorry. It's opening night. O'Donnell High students will soon take the stage at the Arts and Culture Centre.
This weather update is brought to you by the 511 app. Know before you go. Check road conditions, highway cameras, and the provincial plow tracker with the NL 511 app.
That weather in the NL 511 app, sort of what we were talking about.
You took the words right out of my mouth. That's exactly what I was thinking.
Well, we were talking about squalls and whiteouts a little earlier.
Yeah, take a look at what it looked like in Corner Brook this afternoon. That's nuts.
At least she's wearing the kind of jacket where she's not going to get lost. But look at the wind, blowing snow.
Yeah, it's not even the wind though. It was the wind chills and the cold temperatures. It's crazy.
Has a certain winter-esque beauty though too, doesn't it?
It is. I love it. Yeah.
Although you can see there where the visibility becomes a problem, right?
Yeah, of course.
All right, friends in Corner Brook, we feel your pain here in the Avalon.
Oh, we saw it too.
We did.
Yeah.
Yeah, but rough time. Now, that's not all. Take a look at this.
The thick ice in the straits is still causing problems for Labrador's marine ferry service. These pictures are from last week. They show what the ferry is up against, and today Labrador Marine announced the interim service from Blanc-Sablon to Corner Brook instead of St. Barb.
Right, so change there. It'll be using the Hummatic W to handle passenger and vehicle traffic. Its regular vehicle, the Kayak W, will stay in Blanc-Sablon until the ice conditions improve and things can finally get back to normal. So there you go, February ice conditions.
Hey, same as last year.
So what you say, we need winds to go, where is it?
We need them to come out of the northeast, basically, to push that ice out. But yeah, let's take a look at let's see what the satellite radar is. So I showed you this a little bit earlier this week, and to me this is mesmerizing. So absolutely beautiful. I know it's not if you're in the thick of things.
Does that wind or that direction help move the ice, or?
Well, you can kind of see that it is pushing it off, but it's pushing it towards Newfoundland, really, is what's happening. It's pushing it away from Labrador and towards Newfoundland. So no, it's not really helping. It's actually building
easterly.
More pressure. Yeah, more westerly, actually.
Sorry.
So, but that combined with the cold air mass that we're seeing is making these, what I say is beautiful streamers. Snow squalls, I know, again, it's not great if you're involved in them. But we're seeing lots of snow squalls along the west coast, and it's reaching as far as the Avalon as well. So you can see them here. They're not really being picked up on the radar, but they're certainly there. And when you're in these squalls, you're seeing near zero visibility, and it does look like that's going to continue. So here's the one, or the squalls that we're seeing across the Avalon. This one in particular, the one from Placentia through to Bay Bulls, actually closed some roads earlier today. Those have since opened. But we are looking at that risk of snow squalls as we head through the night tonight, and we still do have the snow squall warnings in place from Corner Brook through to Port aux Basques, the Burin Peninsula. Even though you can't see them on radar, they're certainly happening. And then the Avalon, and then snow squall watches for Gros Morne, and then towards Deer Lake, and then along the south coast. So that combined with some extreme cold warnings up through Labrador. So that cold air mass is what's helping that, and those onshore winds. Temperatures around -26 for Lab City, -16 for Corner Brook, and then -9 as you head towards the Avalon. Factor in those wind chills, it's feeling closer to -26 for you in Corner Brook, -20 in St. John's, and up through Lab City. Much warmer, milder, relatively milder than it was yesterday. -39 is what it's feeling like with that wind chill. So as we head through the night tonight, again, those winds are going to stay strong. We're still in that westerly flow, which means that risk of snow squalls will continue for most of us. And then we've got some strong winds along coastal Labrador as well, 80, 90 km/h gusts tonight, and then that with some flurries that will continue as well. So your temperatures are actually going to drop even more, back down to about -19, -18 for Grand Falls, Windsor, -teens for St. John's, and then up through Labrador. Milder for you in Lab City, -25 tonight. You'll actually notice that temperature will continue to climb. And then -24 for Happy Valley, Goose Bay, but you're still looking at that potential for a few flurries tonight. Wind chills overnight, we're looking at, or rather this is today, or into the overnight tonight, looking at about -29 to -30 across the province. So if you're looking at heading outside, just make sure you are bundled up through tonight. Now, tomorrow, still keeping that potential for some snow squalls in. We're still under this cold air mass. We're still looking at those onshore winds, certainly along the west coast. Areas in the Burin Peninsula as well as the southern Avalon, wouldn't be surprised to see those snow squalls continue at least through the first half of the day. Temperatures are actually going to be a little bit cooler as well. -9 for St. John's, -10 for Clarenville. Now, as you head towards central, you're going to stay sunny through the day, -12 for Grand Falls, Windsor. But again, keeping that snow squall and westerly winds 30 to 50 kilometers per hour. So another nice day through the day tomorrow. Up through northern peninsula, temperatures in the -teens. Same up for southeastern Labrador, but again, that risk of flurries, westerlies for you, 50 to 70 kilometers per hour. And then we'll see that snow move in, but milder air for Lab City. -16 will be your afternoon high, so a little bit of relief for you, and plenty of sunshine through central Labrador. So that's a look at your forecast. We'll look ahead towards the weekend coming up.
I actually think it was probably one of the worst kept secrets inside Liberal circles.
Tonight on The Talk, our panelists tackle the reason for and the fallout from Premier Ball's abrupt resignation announcement. You don't want to miss it. Their take in just a few minutes.
Tonight, I'm announcing that my time in politics is coming to an end.
Big political news the week in this province with the resignation of Premier Dwight Ball, and we've assembled an expert political panel to break down what all of this means. It's time for the talk. In studio, I'm joined by former Liberal advisor and lawyer John Sams, as well as former Tory Cabinet Minister Keith Hutchings. Welcome to the studio.
Thank you.
And in our CBC Vancouver location, Mona Rossiter is there, and Mona is a senior NDP advisor, so welcome to all three of you. First topic, Dwight Ball. Why now? Was he pushed, or is this the time that he just chose to go? Mr. Sams?
Well, I actually think it was probably one of the worst kept secrets inside Liberal circles that, Dwight Ball was likely going to run through 2 elections, and then his time was going to come. I think that, when you take a step back, I know that we're all focused on the last 3 months events, but when you take a look back at the past 10 years, he's been elected that long. He's been leader of the Liberal Party for 8 years, I believe. That's a pretty good run, and there's an expiry date.
We were all sitting here not that long ago. Why would he run and then leave not even a year in?
Well, it's one of these things that a party, as Premier Ball said, needs renewal. And so, he led the party through a minority government for the last year and got a minority election victory. And now it's time to pass the baton on to the next person.
Mr. Hutchins, your thoughts?
I think it's reflective of some of the missteps that transpired over his first term, went into a general election, just squeaked out a minority government, and some of the things that have happened since then. In politics and in cabinet and caucus, there's always a review going on of leadership and can we win the next term. And I think inside, I would predict there was some concerns about Mr. Ball's leadership. There's a review coming up in June. All of that culminated in an event where I think Mr. Ball probably assessed it all, saw the lay of the land and said, now is probably the best time for me to go.
All right, Mona Rossiter, we're going to actually talk about what this means for the Conservatives in a bit as well, but what's your sense of the timing?
Well, I think it's a failed opportunity, and the Liberals have recognized that they called a snap election. They didn't get a majority government. It's been one disaster after another since the election, with patronage appointments and just blatant disregard for codes of conduct. And I think the party said, yeah, it's time for you to go. Your leadership has been ineffective, and you need to move on. So I think, yes, I think it was made clear to him he had to leave.
John Sams, do you think that these recent difficulties, Carla Foote and Mr. McIntosh and his lucrative contract, even though apparently he's qualified, do you think these took their toll?
I'm not going to sit here and say that they didn't matter. Of course it did, but the reality is that when you're premier of the province or when you're a leader of a political party, you're being challenged all the time internally. You don't see it publicly. That's just the reality of it. Whether it was going to be the most recent controversies that you want to focus on, this was going to come sooner or later at any event.
All right. Let's go back to election night, which doesn't seem that long ago.
No.
Your leader made a certain prediction. Ches Crosby took out his crystal ball, and this is what he had to say.
We now have a situation of constitutional instability. Where will this end up? It will not end up with Dwight Ball as Premier of Newfoundland in 1 year from now.
Now, he was kind of mean-spirited that night, and I think he ended up apologizing for it, but where's Ches Crosby going to be?
Well, I think right now he before the last AGM, did ask for a leadership review. The executive of the party is reviewing that now in terms of process, in terms of leadership, and hope to have that completed. I think they set a date around June or earlier. Obviously, with what has transpired now, it may move it up a little bit because now we're in the terrain where there could be an election called once we get into the legislature being opened, if a budget is brought down or not, whether there's a non-confidence vote or not. So that sort of would maybe speed it up a little bit.
We're going to get into the governance, but if these guys, let's say they put Andrew Furey in there or some new face, Antle, Dean McDonald, Bernie Davis, is there pressure now on the PCs when they look at that leadership review? You know what, maybe Ches, he got us to where we are now, but it's time for him to actually follow Dwight Ball into the sunset.
Well, when you look at Ches, when we came from the last, we had 7 seats, we went to 15, and really came within a couple of seats of forming at least a minority government. There's something to be said for that, but the party is in a process now of looking at all of that. You've got a caucus of 15. All of those collectively and the party will determine, if Ches is endorsed, and if not, there'll have to be another process. But I think that's with any leader, and you go through that process.
But is there any thinking that Mr. Crosby may have peaked last time around?
Not that I'm aware of, but that's for the party and the general electorate to decide if he stays as leader and goes to the polls.
Mr. Sams, no matter who wins the Liberal leadership, do you guys want to run against Ches Crosby, or does it matter?
I don't think it matters a heck of a lot, but I can say that there's only one person likely in the entire province of Newfoundland and Labrador that wants to see an election right now, and that's Ches Crosby. What he wants to do is avoid that exact leadership review. He wants to avoid that and get into an election so he gets another kick at the can. His party, at least the people I'm speaking to, don't want him there anymore.
All right, Mona Rossiter, it looks as though Alison Coffin, your leader, is the only one who has kind of genuine stability right now. What's the NDP's take on Mr. Crosby's future and what this all means?
Well, Anthony, I mean, I'm just struck by what Keith and John, just talking about politics, the way we've always talked about politics. It's going to be, ping pong back for, PCs and Liberals. And the thing is, I think the electorate in the election in the spring sent a message to governments that we have to work together, that it isn't about, winner takes all and no collaboration. And I think the Newfoundlanders and Labradors want to see whoever is elected in the next election to collaboratively work across all parties. And I think we have an opportunity to do that now.
But I'm assuming of all parties, the NDP would probably like to see the election pushed the furthest so you guys can get more organization, because there was criticism about you having candidates right across the province last time.
Well, we're pretty organized now. We feel we have, a healthy bank account for the NDP, and we are actively, since the last election, since a minority government, we've been actively organizing to be election ready.
Okay.
So, but I think we have to get away from this old style politics, and I think the Newfoundlanders and Labradorians want to see us work together and figure out how to do politics differently in Newfoundland and Labrador.
Let's talk about getting away from politics and talk a bit about policy here, and it's hard to totally divorce them, but if Dwight Ball says they want a new leader pretty quickly, they want the new leader involved in a budget and try to pass the budget, sounds to me maybe even campaign on a budget. How is this all going to work given the quick time frame that, and he's still the leader, I mean, he can move this stuff along even in a minority situation. How is this going to work, Mona?
Well, I think first of all, I think we can't move the way we're talking about it. That'll be just a coronation of another Liberal leader who will then take the party forward. But until there's some structural change in how the Liberal Party and the PCs and Newfoundland politics is done, nothing will change. Mm-hmm. What we need to see is that collaborative effort to bring forward a budget that works for Newfoundlanders and Labradorians.
Among all parties.
That's right, among all parties. But the thing is, we've been distracted from so many important issues, Muskrat Balls being one of them, because of patronage appointments and infighting and a caucus disarray in the Liberal Party.
Okay,
it's got to change.
As far as moving things go in the time frame, you're touching experienced politician, former cabinet minister, what's your sense of how this...
Yeah,
it seems to me that this is really unpredictable.
It's very unpredictable. I mean, the budget process, in my experience, starts in November, and you start with departments then rolling up their budgets, their needs, their wants, and that process carries on from there. So you have a situation here now where you have a premier that's decided he's not running again, who would be fully engulfed in the budgetary process along with those in caucus or cabinet, and you're going to a leadership review. You have to go through interim supply, which could be non-confidence.
Pay everybody.
And then you've got to go through the process of a budget. So do you have an outgoing premier, really a lame duck premier is going to bring in a budget, or you're waiting for a new leader to come in who really would have nothing, no involvement in that budget really, so he can't come in or she can't come in and put a stamp on a budget that they haven't been involved with. You wouldn't think so.
No.
So it throws it all up in terms of what we're doing here in regards to the finances of the province and in terms of a budget.
John Sam, you used to advise the premier, you're a senior advisor. What's your sense? How can this work?
Well, I think that what we have to remember is that there's no law that says that a budget absolutely has to happen in April. Right, so as Keith mentioned, you have the interim supply. You can get a few months out of that, and the new leader can come in and
just
put
their stamp on it. That makes sure 40,000 paychecks go out.
Right,
so
that's
that people, it has to happen.
Government can operate.
Yeah,
keeps
okay.
train.
Sorry to interrupt you.
No worries.
Yeah.
It keeps the trains running, effectively.
And
so you can do that, and the new leader can come in and put their stamp on it. I mean, sure, Premier Ball has said that he'd like the new leader to come in soon, but if I were that new leader, I'd be saying, okay, well, if I'm having my stamp being put on this budget, then I'm going to take my time. I mean, I think 2016 was a little bit rushed, and look how that turned out.
Right.
So I think that's what we're going to see. We're going to see interim supply and probably a budget that won't happen in April this year.
Please, speaking for the media, can you hold off on the election till at least early of next year? Appreciate your time. I have a feeling all three of us will be talking again. It's going to be a very busy time. Mona Rossiter in Vancouver, thank you very much. And gentlemen,
thank you.
Appreciate you being here. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The ongoing protests and blockades of railway lines across the country have caused some major disruptions to passenger and cargo trains, but the effects appear to be minimal in our province. Now, the Mayor of St. John's says it's mostly car dealerships that are affected right now, but if the blockades continue, other retailers could start to feel the pinch as well.
The impact has been somewhat minimal so far. A lot of the goods that come into Newfoundland come in on boat or truck, or the two main ways. And so any goods that go by rail to Montreal or Halifax, then obviously they can't make it through to St. John's. Cars will be a good example of that. Most of the cars are shipped by rail to Halifax and then brought to St. John's. So that there will be some delays in that. But in terms of goods, general merchandise goods at the major chains, they have distribution centers that I understand are pretty well stocked. So if this goes on, you may see some issues occurring.
Now, about those blockades, there's a possible break in some of the tension. RCMP in British Columbia say they will pull back from the road in Wet'suwet'en territory where the friction started, and they will move to a nearby town. The Trudeau government is hopeful that will bring down some rail blockades elsewhere.
I believe the time has come now for those barricades to come down. We have met the condition that those who were on the barricades had said was important to them before they would change their posture. Then that work has been done, and I think quite appropriately, and now it's time to move forward.
Now, the hereditary chiefs have not yet responded. The protest camp in southern Ontario remains in place. Meanwhile, CN Rail was granted an injunction to remove protesters from a blockade that was set up in suburban Montreal. Some residents expressed exasperation that protesters are, in their words, blocking the city. Quebec's premier says the blockade is not on Indigenous land and police will enforce the injunction using force if necessary. Continuing our series on old churches that have found new purposes, tonight on Repurposed, video producer Mark Cumby pays a visit to Blackhead.
We're in what was originally constructed as a one-room schoolhouse in Blackhead. And when this schoolhouse was built in 1879, there used to be a stone church just on the side of it. And it was called the Star of the Sea. And it was built by Bishop John Thomas Mullock. And he's a very famous bishop. He was the bishop that finished the Basilica in St. John's. Now, the stone church didn't last. So it lasted for about 47 years, but the mortar, for some reason, the mortar didn't hold. And it started to come apart and it wasn't safe anymore. So around the early 1900s, they started to move everything from the stone church into this building. So it became a school and a church. The building was vacant from around 1990 till 1996, and it wasn't being used at all. So a group of us got together and we said, well, what are we going to do? Are we going to act? Because if we don't act now, we're probably going to lose the building. So we formed a group, the Chapel Restoration Committee, Blackhead Cape Spear. Way too long a handle now. Now we know when you're trying to fill out applications. When we formed our group, our focus was to save the building. The museum kind of came after the fact.
It is the focal point of the community because it's the last little building that even people who hadn't been living here for years but were from Blackhead used to visit knew. And it's actually drawn the community together because we're part of St. John's and a lot of people who are from here are living other places, but we have different events. The little museum has been a central point where people who used to live here can come and ask questions or visit, and their descendants. And we're also dealing with, in our events, the whole community. The kitchens open up and everyone bakes. We have an afternoon tea. Everyone will bake cookies like in their own kitchens and bring them here. They all help out. So it's really kind of brought the community together because without the museum, there'd be no reason for, everyone has their busy lives, there'd be no reason for everyone to actually get together. Older people get amazed when you went to school here. Younger people can't believe that you're still alive and you went to school here.
You know, this building represents the spiritual side, the educational side, the cultural side of the people that lived in this community.
Well, the snow must go on. O'Donnell High School in Mount Pearl is bringing the Wedding Singer to the Arts and Culture Center stage tonight, but it hasn't been all that easy. Snowmageddon through practice times as well as exam schedules, totally off course. Another hurdle, just trying to figure out the 80s fashion.
We lock in these dates 2 years in advance. Can't really move it. The Arts and Culture Center is a busy place. The biggest challenge for us this year was more or less the weather. So Mother Nature wasn't a kind lady to us this year. We lost, I'm going to say 60 hours of rehearsal time. The government then pushed our exams back. And these kids, a lot of them wrote final exams 2 weeks ago. So that gives them marks for universities, stuff like that. However, they're pretty resilient kids, despite losing all that rehearsal time.
It was definitely a challenge because of Snowmageddon and all the days missed we had from that. We actually, a total of a week came out of Snowmageddon, and we all really had to put in extra effort at home, and then when we came back to the rehearsals, knowing our lines, choreography, songs, we all kind of had to put in that extra amount of effort to make sure it all came together.
We definitely had some challenges, and I know that we were a little bit afraid for a while there, but I think it just helped everybody get on their feet and know that they really had to put the work in, and we certainly did.
Everything that we do is videotaped and put on Google for them to rehearse at home, like a little bit of homework. And we noticed that the traffic on that particular site was increasing. And when they came back after the snowstorms were over, it was almost like we didn't miss a beat. It was perfect.
Honestly, I'm a fan. I'd like to go back to 80s fashion. Some of the stuff is a little bit much, but no, I like it.
Have you told your parents that you were a big fan of the fashion of the 80s?
Oh yes. My mom actually was a teenager in the 80s, and she, sorry mom, she had some really awesome clothes that she dug out for me when we found out we were doing this production. This skirt actually was hers that I'm wearing. So it was really cool to get to share that with her and get to take a visit into her wardrobe.
I think it's definitely an interesting look. I personally wouldn't wear it, but I know that in the 80s it was definitely an outfit that people like to wear at weddings.
It makes me emotional. A lot of these kids I don't teach, so I only interact with them through this musical. And being the producer, I'm not on stage with them. I'm more or less in the background. But it's very overwhelming, it's very humbling, it's very empowering for a teacher to see how resilient these kids are and how good they do under pressure. And they'll do fine.
The weather update is brought to you by Beltone, your partner in better hearing.
Yeah, that show, that O'Donnell show, looks great. It's on tonight, tomorrow, and Saturday.
That's right.
And I got to talk to them. You know, the 1980s, they made it sound as though it was like a century ago.
It wasn't that long ago.
Well, not to us.
No.
To me, anyhow. But it looks like a great show. 7:30, so tonight, tomorrow, and Saturday, right?
Yep.
Speaking of Saturday, is that where we're going to take a look?
That's exactly where we're going to take a look.
Perfect.
Saturday afternoon actually looks pretty nice.
Okay,
for
good.
most of us. Let's take a look at the future tracker. We're going to see a ridge of high pressure just skirt south of us, which means things should stay quiet. Now, along the west coast, you're looking at the potential for some snow squalls again as an area of low pressure just moves to the north up through Labrador. And that's going to bring some flurries for you as well. But overall, not a whole lot happening. We should see plenty of sunshine. And those temperatures are actually going to improve finally into those minus single digits. This is still below seasonal, but overall quite nice. -5 for Corner Brook and then -6 for St. John's. Up through Labrador, it's going to be mild as well. -7 for Lab City and then -6 as you head towards Happy Valley, Goose Bay. But again, you're going to hang on to that potential for flurries through the afternoon. Now heading into Sunday, another quiet day for the most part. A ridge of high pressure moves in from the north, so that means we're going to see some cooler air with that. But really, it's onshore flurries, the story for the west coast. The rest of the island looking at some sunshine, and then some flurries will make their way through Labrador. Once that ridge moves in, though, it's going to bring some clearing skies with it as well. But another quick system moves in for Monday. That's going to move through, bring some flurries.